my cup of tea.
I see.
Cup of tea.
Hello, everybody. And welcome back to Shay with Amos. I'm your host, Jacob Gorgi, and today we are here with Dr. Refaat Abdel-Malek. He's a very close friend. No, sorry.
Yeah, close friend.
Close friend. Okay, maybe close.
Sure. I'm as young as you are.
Oh, sorry. Anyways, so welcome to the show, Dr. Refaat. How are you?
Thank you very much. Very nice. I'm glad to be here.
Okay, well, thank you. So we're gonna start. So you came to America 1967.
1967. That's right.
East Coast, West Coast.
East Coast. I came to first. We landed into North Carolina, Raleigh, North Carolina, and this is where I started my study for my postgraduate degree. I spent until 1972, where I graduated. I got my PhD. And then my first job here was at the Illinois Institute of Technology, downtown Chicago,
I see.
which was a very interesting experience. After a few years was a little bit disappointing because I'm used to the fact that a professor is an eminence in practical applications, not theories. But unfortunately, at IIT, it was not exactly anybody that was really interested in practicing engineering. They were more interested in scientific research that's related to engineering, which I appreciate that, but is not my cup of tea.
I see.
Cup of tea.
So obviously we're living in Chicago at one point, and you came before St. Mark's was even built.
Yes, yes. When I came, there was very nice few families here. I remember with many thanks رؤوف عبد السيد وسلوى وجرجس. في 2 جرجس كانوا، واحد جرجس الطويل which his wife is Nariman. Now they living in Houston, Texas. They moved, but they spent some time with us here. And also a few other families. جرجس قصير كمان كان هنا. He was one of the people that were trying to put together, along with Uncle Hatif Mawad, the weekly service as much as possible, because we were visited here to do the liturgy by Abuna Moros from Canada, from Toronto, and he was very kind that he kept coming here as much as his schedule allowed, because as you know, there was very few priests at the time in the United States. But he was generous enough. He continued his commitment to do services for us, although it was Saturdays, but that was enough, not only to do the liturgy, but also I remember with appreciation to Tant Ferial and Mary Abutar. They were the first Sunday school teachers. And we used to hold this. Of course, the children, our children at that time, you can imagine, they were all very young. So we didn't have anybody that's in high school yet. Most of the children were either in the grade schools or maybe at best in the secondary schools. So that was a very interesting memories in the early 70s, until of course we were blessed with Abuna Moros Bishay, who came here. I think it was close to the end of 1973, and this is where we have rented a church in Oak Park. And that church was a big blessing for us until we bought a church actually in the city of Roselle, which is sort of on the northwest. That church stayed with us until the church, the current church at St. Mark, was built, and Abuna Morus Bishai was serving there. He actually, before he departed to heaven, he had blessed the land here where we are now, expanding and doing the campus of the St. Mark Church in Chicago. But God was really merciful in Abuna Morus, because he was a man of sickness that actually was really not very comfortable for him. One of the things that was really hurting him is that he had to do a lot of radiation on his skin because he had a skin disease. And that was really very challenging for him during the service, because you can imagine when all of your way of skin respiration and was hardly bearable for him to spend 2-3 hours in the liturgy because he was not sweating. The treatment closed all the skin to the end, to the extent that he used to be extremely hot even in the cold weather, and we had to bring fans and things like that. But the Holy Father was really bearing with all of that, and he did so many things for our families in this area that he actually consolidated the congregation in Chicago behind him before he departed. He departed in 1979, and this was the year actually that I have had accepted an assignment out in South America and Venezuela with the same company that I worked for, because I didn't mention that after a few years at IIT, I was able to do some consulting work for the company named Harza Engineering Company, and after a couple of years they recruited me and I left IIT and joined them. And after I joined them, they had a huge assignment in Venezuela that I was fortunate to accept it, and we moved. At that time, I had 2 children, because the first child, Maggie, was born in North Carolina when I was studying. The second one, in 1974, Sammy, was born here in Chicago. And then they were actually in different grades in the school when we left here, and fortunately we were able to have them join American schools in Venezuela. Venezuela was a very beautiful country, really. We enjoyed the country very well at the time we went. Of course, now, unfortunately, the situation is totally different from the time that we were there. In 1993, we came home because situation was Venezuela was starting to be very challenging, lack of security, quite a bit of challenges with thefts and no family security. But we were blessed in Venezuela with our daughter Marie, who was born there in 1980, and she did quite a bit of her schooling in Venezuela, but she came here and finished her school here in Northbrook. So that's the story of us, and I wanted to mention that the blessing that God gave us to go to Venezuela was really very important for our spiritual family relationship. Because while we were here in Chicago, there was a lot of busy time with many families around us, with trying to build the congregation. And one of the biggest challenges that we have taken upon ourselves, Atif and I, was to translate most of the services in English, because we knew that the future of the church here cannot continue to be Arabic or Coptic. It was very nice to insert some Coptic so that we keep the heritage of the Coptic church in our minds and our hearts, but basically for the kids growing to understand and to prescribe and to have the fellowship in the liturgy, it was very important that we translate in English. I promised you that I will bring you one of those books that were handwritten. We actually had to the first version of the English translation was a handwritten Arabic and English, and both sides, one column Arabic, one column English. But then I forgot to bring it. I'll bring it some other
time. Okay. Well, we can just put a picture up somewhere here, James. Over. Got it? Okay. Somewhere here we'll put a picture, and we'll put a picture of everything.
Yeah. So that was a big challenge, and that kept us quite a bit on our toes, and sometimes was a sacrifice to be paying attention to our families. But then when we went to Venezuela, we had nobody. So it was up to us, my wife and I, Refaat and I, to keep up with the children, their spiritual understanding, and also the Sunday school. One thing that I wanted to mention, that this was really instrumental in keeping us as a family praying together, reading the Bible together, which is something that is important for every family in order to be able to defend against all of these challenges that we see around us today. These challenges are multiplying these days, especially when you go to education at school. There's quite a bit of challenge with the message that the teachers are giving the children, let alone their peers. So it's up to the family not to depend only on the church, because anybody comes to the church is few hours. But most of the time you are really dealing with family effort to make sure that their children spiritually are attended to and really watch for, in order to make sure that when they grow up, they continue in the faith and they continue to adhere to orthodoxy, because there is a lot of other challenges, not only to Christianity, but on top of that to the terms and to the understanding of the correct understanding of Orthodox teaching and tradition. So it is a cooperative effort between the church and the family in order to make sure, but I would say more responsibility is on the family, even draw in from the church resources, because their children has to be attended to very well. The reason I'm saying this is because we were lucky that we stayed away for 14 years in Venezuela when the children were growing up. So that helped quite a bit, their upbringing into our tradition. To tell you the truth, I used to come here to Chicago to pick up videotapes of liturgies. God bless Abuna Shnuda, because he was at the time when Abuna Morqos departed to heaven. Abuna Shnuda, he came to Chicago, and we owe him a lot of the hymns and the education of the young people at that time in order to prescribe and to really adopt many of our Orthodox liturgical hymns. So I wanted to have my children not to miss that, so I used to come in here and ask people. They used to have videotaping many of these liturgies. And one thing about Abuna Shnuda, that he never kept time.
Oh.
That liturgies would go on and on and on. So I still have the tapes, by the way, until now. And we used to take them back because I used to come here because the home office was here in Chicago. So I used to travel frequently here to Chicago, and that was one of the main things that I wanted to do, is keep the connection between the family and the church, if not by physical presence, but at least by resources that I bring with me from here.
Yes.
So I highly recommend for people, even they are not leaving Chicago, people that are living here, that is very important for the parents to pay attention to the upbringing of their children into the traditions and the values of the Orthodox Church. It's so important.
Yes.
Do not just lower your guard and say, well, we come to church and there is Sunday school and that's enough.
Right.
That to me is a miss, and if we don't become very careful, at the end of the day, God forbid, we might be sorrow to see some of these young children grow up and leave the church.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, this past year we had a pandemic where we had to stay home, where we couldn't go to church, to the point where we were spending things like Holy Week and Easter at home. So, well, I was wondering, with your experience in Venezuela and comparing to the experience you had last year, was that any similar? Was it different?
It's a little bit different because at least when you are here, many of the services you can find on YouTube.
Oh, that's true.
Live.
Yeah.
When we were in Venezuela, I had to come and pick up a videotape and go back, and it was, of course, depending when was this. So it was there is a sort of lag in time, but the fortunate thing with the pandemic here is that we still are able to draw on the resources of the church live through the technology, which is not the same as attending church. I mean, there is a big difference between somebody sitting at home and watching. I know from my experience, you are not adhering to the what you call that, adhering to the relationship. No, not relationship. The fear.
Oh, I see.
And the godly fear that you draw on when you are in the community, in the presence of the Lord in the church.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get distracted by something at home, or a phone call that comes, or somebody that's playing, or there's a noise here, noise there. You might not stand all the time because you are not really into the presence of the holies in the church.
Right.
And that sometimes is a distraction, but at least is much better than being absent.
Yeah.
Because the other thing, if you don't attend, you will be completely absent and you lose the fellowship with the community and with the Lord. But thank God, we are very blessed here in Chicago because the church managed to increase attendance, especially after many people have taken the vaccine. And we see now the church is full. if you look at Holy Week here was a big blessing.
It was.
And there are a lot of people that are very conscientious and really appreciate that tremendously, because many people stayed home to allow other people to be able to come. So not the usual thing, we come every day. There are a lot of people that was selective, took few days of the Holy Week to allow other people to be able to enjoy the blessing of the service. A Good Friday was a big blessing, but mentioning Good Friday, we used to celebrate Good Friday in Venezuela as a family because we had the resources, and we were very blessed that we could take off work and stay home quite a bit of the Holy Week, and particularly, of course, Good Friday. And on top of that, we used to go to an Antiochian church in Venezuela. Their tradition is not like ours. We spend the whole day, and at the end of the day we do the burial, and then everybody goes home and come back for the service of watching the tomb. But they, and this is where we have a double blessing, because when we finish our service at home, we get ready and go to the Antiochian church, because they have a very beautiful service of burial and a procession of the body around the church. It was about an hour and a half, but it was a very beautiful singing, very uplifting spiritual thing after you spend the day in our Orthodox tradition, and then you go to the Antiochian and you have the blessing. And of course, we used to attend the Easter service at the Antiochian church, so that we don't miss communion.
Do they do it at night or in the morning? Because I know some churches.
No, at night.
They do it at night.
The Easter service is at night. Very much, they are very close to us.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, very close to us. But of course, the service was in Arabic and Spanish.
Really?
So we learned a little bit of the liturgical Spanish service being there, but mostly in Arabic, because a lot of people were sort of different ages, and of course the older people have not prescribed very well to Spanish, and they have been used to the Arabic service.
Yeah, wow, that's interesting. Yeah, because it's funny. There was this is a couple years ago now. We had a bishop come in, and I think he was from Bolivia.
Oh yes.
Yeah, and he did. I think he did like the very final blessing in Spanish.
But this guy is really a big blessing in Bolivia, because you should see how much he has established a service for the children.
Yeah, they
have grade schools in there, and kinder and pre-kinder, and his service there was so impressive, even to the authorities, that they have been encouraging families to go to attend his school.
Wow.
This is how you draw people to Orthodoxy.
Of course.
Because you bring your children, you start educating them, but at the same time, when you educate them, you give them a flavor of the Orthodox faith, and then that goes back home. Most of the people in Bolivia are Catholic, but many of them are not practicing Catholics. This is really the problem. The same thing was in Venezuela. You come to Holy Week in Venezuela, and everybody goes to the beach. Not go to church.
Right.
And that is really was quite a bit of a really achievement for the bishop in Bolivia to be able to attract many people to understand how important it is, the worship during Holy Week. Bolivia is not very much like Venezuela. They are not so outgoing people like Venezuelans. And Bolivia, fortunately, they don't have many beaches, so people have to stay home. So that was something but he is instrumental in many things. Now he's expanding outside Bolivia. I understand that he is doing many other services. We were not fortunate to go to Bolivia, but I understand also we have another bishop that's very active in Brazil. I'm sorry, I don't remember the names because
it's okay. We'll find the names.
But also that bishop is really a very energetic and very active in a society that actually Catholic, but again not really very religious.
Yes. Yes. So then I was wondering, not looking forward yet, but kind of looking after St. Mark's Ville. Now I understand, like you said, you weren't here when it was being, or you were kind of in and out when it was being built. But you were very heavily involved in the 2 expansions.
Yes.
So that was the gym expansion where we had a gymnasium and I think some other Sunday school rooms.
Actually, before the gym expansion, when I came back, St. Mary was struggling, trying to get their building up.
Oh, really?
Because at that time, we used to live next to St. Mary's church. We used to live, when we came back from Venezuela, we used to live in Glenview.
Oh, okay.
And they rented from the sisters, Catholic sisters, was really 10 minutes away from our house. And of course, Abu Nasha was not very happy with this because they had bought a land and they were trying to get that land built, but they had quite a bit of problems between an engineer that they hired who was not very forceful, because the village permits would not permit them to build the church more than 100 people. And Abu Nasha said 100 people, that's not, we have more than 100 people right now. I cannot build a church, which he was right. I cannot build a church for now, and what do I do 10 years from now?
Right.
So we were fortunate to find a good architect that was able to convince the village that the church could be about 350, which is the first church, St. Mary. As you know, now they expanded into the Archangel Michael.
Yeah.
But that first church, between Fay Abutar and myself, we got a contractor that was very good and did the church, and also we got a sort of an artist from Egypt to be able to complete the pews and the iconostasis, and many of the artifacts that identifies with our Orthodox tradition in building a church. In fact, he was so innovative that he brought the towers.
Really?
Rebuilt from Egypt.
Wow.
This was something that was really very interesting, because he made them very much like you would do the. It was like a polyethylene kind of compound that he would pour in Egypt to the shapes of the towers. And all we have to do here is bring a crane and put them on top of each other. And these are the current towers that, and the towers and dome.
Wow.
The dome is the same way. Of course, the dome is a little smaller dome in St. Mary in order to accommodate the technology that they have at that time. So that saved a lot of money, and that saved a lot of time too. Then we came into the gym, where it was a very interesting expansion, because it opened the services of the Church of St. Mark to the community around us. Because as you know, a lot of people come and rent this, especially between volleyball and basketball. There are a lot of community people here that take advantage of that, and which one of the messages that the church has, that we have to be friendly to the community in order to at least the people would be aware and be comfortable with us being in the middle of this society here. And then, of course, you know the story about the main building, which we are sitting in it right now.
Yes.
That was also a very nice, challenging effort, because there was, at the time when we were considering the expansion, there were several options. But the last two options that were remaining was either we continue to build in this campus here, or we expand into an area that's a little bit further west, because as you know now, many families have started to come close to the church, but also expand towards the west up to Naperville, and maybe some of them are also in Aurora or Plainfield. So there was a survey that was done by the youth, and I mentioned particularly Tamer Milad. He was the one in charge of doing that, and the consensus was, although it is not a overwhelming majority, but at least was a majority that was over 60% favoring that we continue to be here. Everybody says we have grown up here and we don't want to go somewhere else. Maybe the next one will be somewhere else, because what helped that very much is that God blessed us, because as you know, we started with only 5 acres.
Yes.
And then the next acquisition was 2.5 acres down on the southeast corner. And then the last acquisition was the was the northeast corner, and this completed the 10 acres that we have right now. Which with that, it helped us to be able to build as big a church as we can, because as you know, we needed to expand the parking, and also we needed to expand the detention pond, because once you build and you cover part of the land, you have to compensate that with a bigger detention pond. So this whole thing worked out very nicely, and of course the nice thing about this, with the blessing of the Lord, that we could complete this in a extraordinary time. I think it took only two years to build the church, and we were able to celebrate the first Christmas in the new church. Not completely done, no pews, nothing, but we were able to celebrate Christmas there. And what really helped us greatly is the recommendation from our sister church in Milwaukee of a very good contractor from Wisconsin. And they were very cooperative, they were very nice people, and we could do a lot of work together in order to accomplish that challenge of finishing early.
Which that is cool, because now that was one of the first Christmas liturgies I ever attended in St. Mark's, was in that church. But and also, so as you know, the congregation in Chicago, I think in 2019, celebrated 50 years of being here in Chicago as a congregation, or actually in the Midwest, really, 50 years. And you actually hosted the event.
Do you have that brochure?
I have it not with me, but it's in. I'll put a picture up here too. It's in a room, but I have it still.
Because that was a very nice. We're actually very grateful to Abuna Moros Dawood from St. Mary, because the priests of the area, they said St. Mark is the first church here, but we are always, all of us are springing out of this basic home, and I think they are right, because many of the congregation here, God bless them, they were instrumental in building these other churches, whether it was St. Mary or St. George or St. Paul. There are a lot of the funding for these churches came from the blessing and the blessed congregation of St. Mark. Although many of them don't attend there, but these are our friends, all of them used to be attending here,
Yeah.
and then it was more convenient because of the distance that they will, fill these other churches. So that was a very good thing. So when they, and this is something that's commendable here in Chicago, that all the priests of the area, they showing so much love to each other that they decided that they should hold coordinated meetings so that people don't feel that these are separate churches.
Yeah.
They feel that they are one church in the city of Chicago, and they all meet together, and sometimes they celebrate the liturgy together at least 1 month, every month, one time every month, which is something that gives a good message to the congregations of all the churches, that we are all one. We are all one in Christ, which was very important. And this is why when this effort was initiated, Abuna Samuel asked Abuna Morros Dawood to be the chair of the committee. And then the committee have included people from all the churches, including the Milwaukee church. Both Wisconsin churches, actually, the church in Madison.
Yeah.
Also. So that was a very nice thing, and I think at the end of the day, we had a very beautiful ceremony.
We did.
That really was uplifting and was really very welcome to really recognize that 50-year anniversary of the church.
Yeah. Funny enough, that ceremony was actually the inspiration for this show. So if you ever want to know behind the scenes, 20 years later, it was because I was at that ceremony. But looking forward.
But most important in that ceremony, which was held here in the Resurrection Church, that St. Mark particularly had their presentation through the youth of the church.
Yeah.
And that was very important message, not only to the congregation but to the youth, because everybody looked up to them, that they are the future, and they have to carry the flag, and they have to decide what is the message for the next 50 years. And that was very nice. We were not all the churches have prescribed to that, but we are the lead church. We always are the lead church, and it was very nice that our youth came forth and really took charge of these presentations, which was really very admirable, very commendable.
Yeah. So 50 years then into the future, as we move on.
Absolutely.
20 to 100 years. First of all, what is one thing that might worry you, that might be lost to time as we move forward as a congregation? But then also, what is something that I hope that is also gained as we move forward as a congregation?
You see, I never worry about the future, because we have seen how the Holy Spirit, it's not a person. It is from the beginning, and you can see that in the era of the apostles.
Yeah.
They have faced so many challenges that far-reaching. We think we have challenges right now. Forget that. This Roman Empire was something that was really so out of any acceptable behavior of a human being. But these guys had no churches. They were not supposed to own anything. They were spreading the word in homes under a lot of discrimination and suppression. So we have faith that the Holy Spirit watches over this and guides the church in the future. What we have to do, the Holy Spirit, of course, doesn't do it alone, because He inspires people to do the right thing, but the Holy Spirit never imposes anything on anybody. the people have to be willing to listen to the guidance of the Holy Spirit. So that's what is being built in the church. And we thank God that there are a lot of people that are, especially young people, inspired by adhering to the traditions, although there is some things that are cultural, which does not have the importance to keep them, but there are traditions that are supposed to be adhered to and supposed to be respected and watched for. And I think these things, I see many models actually. And one of the most inspiring models is what's going on under the Diocese of Los Angeles. Inspired by a forward-thinking, the Metropolitan of Los Angeles. And also, I don't push aside either the Bishop of the Southern Diocese. But those indications that more forward-looking come to us from Ambassador Rabion, the Metropolitan of Los Angeles. And we think that sooner or later we will have a bishop here in this area, which will be an inspiration also to the youth, because I'm sure Sayyidina will send a bishop that's a young person in order to accommodate the needs of the future expansions in the US. One of the important things, the outreach, because we cannot continue to depend on people coming to us from the homeland. This was a big issue in the last maybe 20 years or so. But in the future, I don't think we will continue to have that. So it will have to be the expansion and the growth of the church has to be through missionary work to the communities that we're living in. And that's a really big challenge. So we have to, in order to do that, unfortunately, we still have some discrimination against the communities that are around us. I'm just saying this very frankly. Because if you look around us, how many people that are non-Egyptian that are in the church right now? And when they come to the church, are they still comfortable? Do we make them comfortable? Do we go out of our way to make them comfortable? That, I think, is a challenge to the youth, because they have grown up here. They don't have these traditions that we came with as older people that sort of take us back home way of thinking. And we really trust that the next or the future of the church in the hands of mostly people that are born here and grown here, educated here, lived here, and prescribed to the American way of living, that they don't have these issues of these people are different. Because that's their life, that's their livelihood. Many of their friends are people that are non-Egyptian. So this is really the big challenge to the youth in the next I would say 10 years, not 50 years. That we have to open up and we have to be really very much forward looking to make every person that comes to this church is welcome, not only welcome, that he actually owns part of the church. And this is the way that we can really make sure that we are a missionary church. I love the fact that St. Paul is a missionary church, but there is no such a thing in Christianity that there's a church that's not missionary.
Right.
This is a special focus, but ours here has to direct our attention to become more forward-looking by being more missionary-minded church.
Of course. Well, thank you, Dr. Refaat, for coming on today. I really do appreciate you coming on.
Oh, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm enjoying this very much, and I can talk here until tomorrow. But
yeah. We might do an extended edition. We'll see.
Yeah.
But real quick, before I go into our other thank yous, I just want to make two quick announcements. One, as you guys know, this was actually supposed to be April's episode, but Easter was at the end of the month of this year, so there's a bit of delay, so I do apologize for that. But we are going to be resuming our normal upload schedule in May. So May 30th, I believe, is the last Sunday of the month this month. So we'll be posting regularly, or we will be resuming regular uploads then. But it's just this is because of Easter and stuff, a little bit of a fluke. Also, real quick, I have a book. This is a book that Dr. Atif Mawad recommended to me, I believe, last episode, and it's called The History of the Early Coptic Community in the United States of America from 1955 to 1970. And it's written by a man called Sammy Bullis. Now, Sammy Bullis has written many books, tons of books, and a lot of it is documenting the history of the Coptic community in the United States. This book basically goes through a lot of stuff Dr. Atif mentioned last episode, but like way more in depth. In fact, what Dr. Atif said last episode was like the tip of the iceberg of the stuff. So this book, it's really good. It's really beneficial. So if you want to get your hands on this book, I would go to your local bookstore at your church and ask if they have this book. If not, I believe they can place an order, but don't quote me on that. But I believe they can. Otherwise, I think there will be a digital version of this coming out shortly. So that was our little book plug. Highly recommend it. So now we can get into the other people we need to thank. So first of all, I'd like to thank James Gorgie, our production crew for today. He edits, records, does everything. All the stuff you see behind the scenes, he's the one that's doing that. I also like to thank our production manager, George Coldis, for providing us with this equipment, as well as how to use the equipment. So thank you, George. I'd also like to thank St. Mark's Coptic Orthodox Church for allowing us to film on the premise. We do appreciate that. I'd also like to thank our social media manager, Mariam Shahad, who is the one that makes all the social media posts. Speaking of our social media, if you want to follow us on social media, follow us at any social media platforms, so Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, at Shay with Amos, just how it's spelled, so at SHAY with AMOS. I know, I've heard the spelling thing, I know. All right, but that's how we spell it. So anyways, so feel free to follow us if you want to get guest updates, if you want to send us questions, send us guest recommendations even, if you want to even see some cool pictures behind the scenes, by all means, give us a follow there. Also, I'd like to thank our graphic designer, Peter Osmi, for providing us with our logos. He makes all my logos for my other stuff. He's really good, and I will leave some contact info in the description below. He is based in Cairo, though, so if you do want to use his services, just note the time difference. Otherwise, though, he's done amazing work. We could just put some logos up here, some of the stuff he's done. It'll be all over here. Really cool stuff. Also, I'd like to thank our music provider today, your best friend, Jippy. Sorry, couldn't read it for a second. He's the one that provided our music today. If you want to listen to any of his stuff, he's on all streaming platforms. He just released a new album called Beat Tape 36. It's a very good album. Very good. Recommend it if you want any study music, background music, or any of the sort. So feel free to give him a look as well. Again, thank you, Dr. Refaat, for coming on.
Thank you so
I
much.
really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks a lot, and thank you very much for the help with the sound and the picture.
Yeah, no problem. Anyways, that's the show. God bless and good night.